There were three key people that were behind the startup of Macaloney's Distillery. Master Distiller Michael Nicolson, the Whiskey Einstein Dr. Jim Swan, and the founder Dr. Graeme Macaloney. Dr. Graeme Macaloney, a Scotsman, decided Victoria would be a great place for a single malt distillery as well as a brew pub. But he also knew that he needed a lot of help. So he decided to go after the legendary Dr. Jim Swan, one of the most knowledgeable and respected experts in the industry. Then he coaxed another Scotsman, ex-Diageo Master Distiller Mike Nicolson, to also come on board. Master Distiller at Lagavulen and Glenkinchie, and has worked at more than 18 Scottish distilleries. Jim Swan's scrape, toast, and char the barrel formula allows them to mature whiskies at an earlier age. Unfortunately, Dr. Jim Swan passed away in 2017 and never got a chance to see the international awards that these whiskies are receiving. Well, welcome to Noel's World of Whiskey, and today we are going to go after a local distillery where I live, at least on Vancouver Island. And this is now called Macaloneys, not Caledonian. They just haven't changed the label on this. It's going to be called Macaloney's Island Distillery. And part of that is due to a lawsuit with the Scottish Whisky Association. And they have settled on an agreement that Graeme Macaloney is going to change the names, anything that relates to Scotland, and infers that it is made in Scotland. They are going to change, and I think it's a bit of compromise. They're not going to change everything, but they will no longer call it the Caledonian Distillery, and Caledonian is an old name for Scotland. And there's been a few lawsuits through the years by the Scotch Whisky Association, what we'll call it the SWA. There was one, the first distillery in Canada, malt distillery in Canada, and I think that was in Cape Breton, and I trying to remember the name of it, if it was called Glen Breton, but I think they were a little more successful than they did not settle, and they did go to court, and I think they did beat it in court. The German distillery just recently settled with them. It did, the SWA did win that case. So they're a pretty powerful organization. They are going to protect the Scotch whiskey business in Scotland. And yeah, you know, as much as this guy here that started the distillery is a Scotsman himself, and he has Mike Nicolson, ex-Diageo Master Distiller, working with him, who sort of semi-retired. He had Jim Swan, the legend, the whiskey genius, helping him get the distillery going. But still, SWA is a powerful organization, and they are going to protect Scotch whiskey. So anyways, enough of that. Let's get into it here. We are going to go after, I'm going to just show you this bottle here. It is, to pronounce this, Seraidh. It's a Gaelic name for sherried malt. So you can see the bottle there. And it's got quite a dark color. They say no coloring added. Now, this is very dark stuff, and it is undisclosed age. So we'll start off with the pour. And we'll give it the nose. And that was quite the cork pulling noise there. So, okay. So lots of raisins here. Raisins, prunes, plums. I put an Aberlour here because we know the Aberlour is a bit of a sherry bomb and no name, a no name state, but it's been around a long time. It's got its own fame, but Price-wise, there's not a, I mean, I think this was $109. I mean, it was a gift, but I'm pretty sure it's what it's priced at, around $109. Adlor is now up around 100. Well, this was probably around 130, 135 a few years ago, but it's up around 150-ish now. The Abinad, that is the Abinad, I believe. Yeah, that is the Abinad. All these Gaelic names, so. So we got no sulfur notes, but lots of fruit, very fruity, and we're going to say we're getting maybe fig Newtons here even. Let's give it the palate. Interesting. Under 3 years, very interesting. Nice coating on the tongue. In all fairness, I mean, I wouldn't have bought a whiskey this young normally, but in all fairness, I'm really quite surprised. This has got quite a mature taste for something supposed to be 3 years old. I'm going to take another sip. I was a little bit shocked when I sipped it there. So. Yeah, it's, I can really taste the sherry influence. So the story behind this is, it was, I believe, matured and finished in Oloroso and Pero Menas Butts. So, and these, I think it's Seraidh, Portugal, or Spain, pardon me, Spain, is where they get their casks from. They have a cooperage there where they have access to casks, and I think with the influence of Dr. Swan and Mike Nicolson, who had spent 36 years in the industry and was, I think, with Diageo, over 20 years with Diageo as a master distiller. Lagavulen, Glenkinchie, just a pile of space-side distilleries. So I'll read you a little bit of that here in a bit. But so nice coating, very slight burn. Nothing really nasty about this drink for a 3-year-old whiskey. Nothing nasty about it. There's definitely the dark fruits I'm tasting. I mentioned fig Newtons there. I'm going to go as far as to say that we're getting, I think I mentioned this before, we're getting a little bit of the malt stuff going through here. So I'm going to say the Sultana cookies I used before. But even I'm going to throw in, probably maybe some crisp, some fruit crisp. It's not apple crisp. It's got a richness to it. So I'm going to say something more like, I think I mentioned it before, when we used to go picking huckleberries and blueberries and blackberries. We'd mix them all together and make a crisp out in, when we're out camping and that. So that's what it reminds me of. It's got that kind of richness to it. You can throw whatever fruit you want, but they have to be kind of in the ripe side of things. So that's how I identify ripe fruit and more the dark fruits. I'm not getting a lot of the, like I say, I'm not getting a lot of the apple. I'm going to give it another little top up there. So. Give it a little bit of a chew there. It is, it's really a bit of a shock for whiskey under 3 years. The Canadian law states that the distillery cannot call this a whiskey if it's under 3 years. So there's nowhere on here it says whiskey. It says spirit. So it means it's under 3 years. Malt spirit. And it is a single malt. So But we're now getting more of that fig Newton I talked about earlier there. It's the sweetness and the fig Newtons and that. Maybe some stewed prunes. Very syrupy, even a little bit of maple. I'm getting there, some maple syrup. But I mentioned the malty notes. I think that was the sultana cookies and that, so, or the sultana wafers. But let's go after the finish here. Get a wee bit more of the malt notes now. So, granola and some of that I'm going to say some of the rich, heavy bread that I eat sometimes with when I throw olive oil on it. There, it gets a little bit of sweetness to it. That's the malt. That's kind of the malt I'm getting, and I've had malted barley loaves and that kind of when I was down in Tasmania. I remember there was a bakery that had that really rich malted barley loaf. I haven't seen it up here in Canada or up on the island here, but I just love that stuff. I've looked for it ever since, but it's got a little bit of that richness, you know. Longer finish than I was expecting, you know, which puts it at maybe a short medium. You know, I don't have a pile of descriptors for this because it's a young whiskey and it's playing games with my with my palate here. It's a good whiskey for something we have to call a spirit. I'm just curious where this will be in another 3 years. I've always sort of agreed with some of the other reviewers that give it a chance to age. As Jim McEwen said, there's no shortcuts to aging. You know, but these distilleries got to make money. I mean, this was my understanding was not an easy go for Graeme Macaloney. He put a lot into this. He had to actually outsource revenue. He actually opened it up to the public to invest in casks, and he was in the end successful in getting this distillery up and running. But it's not easy to get distillery up and running unless you're a multi-millionaire, and even at that, you know, you're sitting there on whiskey. It's not making you any money for a good number of years, and that's why a lot of these distilleries get into gin and other you know, vodka, like the distillery up here close to where I live, which actually I worked there prior to when it was a distillery and it was still a farm, and that's Shelter Point. And they did put out some vodkas and that to make some money in order to be able to you know, bring revenue and to be able to have a payroll. My understanding too is Mike Nicolson also spent time there, so he spent time at Shelter Point as well as at the Macaloneys. So he's a guy that came over here and is now living on Vancouver Island. I think he's in Victoria. So, but anyways. It would have been neat to meet Dr. Jim Swan. He's a legend, and I've always admired his you know, his knowledge. I've read a lot of articles on him, some of his writings, some of his you know, some of his lectures and that, some of the YouTube stuff on him. He's quite a fascinating guy. He's had a huge influence on the industry, and I really think that he is kind of the father of you know, the new age of aging whiskey, and certainly is a friend to those new distilleries that, you know, it's taking them a few years before they're profitable and trying to get this stuff aged faster. I've got two comments on that though. Because I follow the Scottish distilleries, maybe I'm a bit spoiled that way, that I started off in Scottish distilleries following them. I mean, I certainly, when I was, you know, drinking Scotch, I was also drinking Canadian whiskies, you know, rye and the what we call rye, which is not pure rye. But my real focus became more on the Scotch from Scotland and the blends, and then of course the Irish whiskies, etc., and even some of the Welsh. And I'm going to say that I haven't really given the Canadian whiskies much of a chance, but when the first distillery opened in Cape Breton, you know, I had already had a collection of Scottish whiskies, and it was still you know, aging its whiskey. And then of course we had the second distillery open that was up in Shelter Point, and it also took a while for that stuff to, and it's now winning awards. And of course now this distillery, Macaloneys, which is fortunate to be able to sell whiskey like this that is so young, and they are selling it. So, but let's give this a little bit of water. So my descriptors basically on this was, yeah, it's kind of, it could be called a sherry bomb, a bit of a sherry bomb. It does have a lot of your sherry influences, but not like other Scotch whiskies. It's kind of unique. There's at some point there, and I didn't want to be rude or anything, but it was like I was tasting sherry pop and mixed in like a thick, syrupy sherry pop. Is what I was tasting in a spirit. Just at one point, I didn't want to use that descriptor, but it's just something that happens when you're, you know, when your palate's kind of playing games with you, because it is different. But I'm not going to be that nasty to say that it tastes confectionery or it tastes like pop. I've heard Ralphie say that a few times, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say that it's just something that flashed through my palate. And in all fairness, get a little bit of water there. Let's just see what that does. So it's 46%. Let me see what the percentage is on this. It is, it's saying 46, I think 45, 46. It's 46, yeah. So it can take water. And we'll give it another little bit of a roll here. And I never really showed you the glass here, but I've added a wee bit of water, but what the heck. It still is holding a dark color. It does not have, it has no coloring in it. So it's really gotten something out of the cask. If it has no coloring, we'll just kind of give it a swirl here. And whether you see the legs or not, because I did add a little bit of water, I can see them. But boy, it's I'm just gonna. It's got a rich, dark, almost like a coffee color, a light coffee color. You know, it's dark. It's dark stuff. You know, and without coloring, it's pretty amazing they're able to pull that kind of color out of a cask in under 3 years. So, oh boy. Now we're getting vanilla. Lots of vanilla. And toffee. Oh, I'm getting, here comes the chocolate oatmeal cookies. There's chocolate in here. That's quite nice with the water. This can take water. So, you know, it's funny because the fruits are really dark now, and definitely back to the fig Newtons here. Dates. Just, you know, that when I said there wasn't a lot of apples, but there is slight bit of tartness to it. It's nice. That's a nice nose. The palate. You know, for something that was given to me as a gift, and I haven't hardly touched it, I'm actually quite surprised. It's actually pretty good stuff. 3-year-old whiskey. I was going to compare it. I was going to do a comparison with a Port Charlotte, or pardon me, no, Bricklatic I think the classic laddie or the organic, one of those. I've got a couple of them. They're no age statements. I think they're quite young, but they're over 3 years, but they're, who knows, 6 years or something like that. But I was going to do a comparison, and I thought, no, it's not fair. In all honesty, I think it could be a fair comparison, but I think they're more barley focused and not as much. I mean, they do finish, and I'm pretty sure Jim McEwen did finish those. Mark Rainier, they were both very focused on the sherry wine. They had so many different cask finishes in those, but it would be neat to kind of compare the two non-age statements. But this one's doing pretty good. It's doing all right there. So let's give it another little sip there. This is a nice sipper. It's pretty good with water. I'm not getting a lot of the wood now. I was getting a lot of, like I say, vanilla in the beginning there, and now a little bit of a coating on my tongue. I'm getting, I mentioned the chocolate, coffee, a little bit of that, chocolate and coffee. And now I'm getting a dryness. So this is an interesting whiskey. I think because I don't think I was ready for this. I thought this would be a real quick interview. Wasn't super excited about doing this one here, and I don't think I was being fair to the whiskey. I mean, it's $109 under 3-year-old whiskey that is actually really shockingly. It's a passable whiskey for something that I wouldn't normally probably touch, because I believe these whiskeys should have a little bit more time in the cask. But and I do get it. You know, they have to. You know, you have to make these places profitable, and there will be a time we'll get a chance a 6 or maybe a 10-year-old. But I think they just released, Sheller Point just released a 10-year-old. So, but anyways, I'm gonna say this is an 81. Yeah, I think 81 is a fair score for this, and just something I wanted to finish off with here. Jim Swan. I really wanted to just give you a bit of an idea of what kind of an influence he had on the industry, and especially with new distilleries. I have a list here of some of the distilleries that he had a big influence on, and these are startup distilleries. So Amrut Distillery in India, and of course you go to any liquor store, you'll see Amrut, and he had a huge influence on that distillery. Working with heat, that was part of his studies when he was doing gas chromatography. You know, he's looking at the effect of heat, aging, looking at the effect of cask, wood and fermentation. And of course that was a big thing in India with Amrut. Annandale. I just did the Bladnoch review, Bladnoch Distillery. Now Bladnoch is a lowland, and there were 3 distilleries left in the lowlands out of a dozen. They were the last 3. You had Auchentoshan, Glenkinchie, and of course Bladnoch. Well, Annandale was one of those distilleries that goes back to the 1800s, and it was shut down in the 30s, I believe. It's just been started up again. He had a big influence on that, getting it going. So now we'll have 4 distilleries from the 1800s in the lowlands. Clydesdale, another distillery that had a big influence on. Cotswold Distillery, Dublin Whisky Distillery, another new one that he had big influence on. They're getting it going. Kavalan, great distillery out of Taiwan, has won a pile of awards. And he had quite a strong relationship there. He was looked at as a mentor to the master distiller of Kavalan, and also had a good relationship with the folks in the distillery there, Kilchoman on Isla, the farm distillery. So again, a big influence on them. They sent a lot of praise at at the funeral and the obituary. I read quite a bit on well, not just Kilchoman, quite a few of the distilleries because of his nature, his kindness. He was a soft-spoken man, just incredibly knowledgeable, a sort of person that did a lot of listening, but when he did speak, everybody shut up and listened. Another one here is Lindores Abbey, that's had a lot of hype. And it's the new distillery that's just opened up that has supposedly has links with the first known distilling that went on in Scotland. So that can be disputed, but that's what the claim is. So Milk and Honey Distillery in Tel Aviv in Israel, another one of his distilleries that he worked very close with. Macaloney Distillery and Morvern. Pandren, of course, the Welsh distillery. And London Distillery. St. George's Distillery in Rudham. And Macaloney's, of course, the one we just discussed. And, of course, up here, you've got Sheller Point. He had... I think Sheller Point, I don't think Jim Swan was involved with that. I think that was Mike Nicolson that was involved there. So... Virginia Distillery down in the States, and of course he worked a lot with the distillers. He sat down a lot with the distillers, and they had a lot of discussions, and they did seek out a lot of his knowledge, because he was such a leader in the new science of working with wood, the aging process, just how to change the character of whiskey. So. Basically, that's Jim Swan. You can do some more research on it. Very interesting fellow. So I'm going to say, drink wisely, drink intelligently, do not drink and drive. Until the next time, so much.